Hey everybody, thank you guys so much for joining me on my channel, The Magical Solution. We are live tonight on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok, and on Twitch. And we are back at it. We are continuing on with our book for this evening, the Medium's book. Now, for those of you who are joining me for the first time, we have been going through Allan Kardec's books, and this is in regards to spiritism, psychic mediumship, intuitiveness, empathy, clairvoyancy, espiritismo, just all the stuff, right? And so we read the first book, which is the Spirits book. That's already up on my YouTube. And now we're on to the second book, which is the Medium's book. And we are almost done. Look, only this much left. Look how much we went through. Crazy. So, don't feel shy if you're joining me for the first time and you didn't catch up on the previous episodes. It is okay. You can always go back and watch them whenever you want to. But the information that you're getting per chapter is a lot of fun to listen to, very different. And by all means, ask a lot of questions. So I read for about 45 minutes for you guys. And then the last 15 minutes, we go over all of your questions that you had during the book. Okay. So we are on, what chapter are we on? We are on 25. We're on chapter 25, and the chapter is entitled Evocations, okay? Now, the subcategories within this chapter are general considerations, spirits who may be evoked, the proper manner of speaking to spirits, the usefulness of private evocations, questions concerning evocations, the evocation of animals, okay, evocations of living persons, and of course, human telegraphy. Okay, so those are the subcategories. That's what we're going to be going over today. So let's get to it. General considerations. Spirits can communicate either spontaneously or answering our call, i.e., they can be evoked. Some persons think that spirits should not be evoked at all, that it is preferable to wait for one who wants to communicate. They believe that in calling a certain spirit, we cannot be sure that it is who it claims to be, whereas one who comes on its own initiative better proves its identity, since it thus shows its desire to converse with us. In our view, that is a mistake. First of all, because we are always surrounded by spirits, most of whom are less evolved and who are eager to communicate. And second, it is for that very reason that if we do not evoke a particular spirit, we open the door for all those who would like to enter. In an assembly where no one in particular is given the floor, it would be open to everyone, and we know what that results would be. By directly appealing to a certain spirit, we establish a link between us. We have called it by our will and thus have set up a sort of barrier to intruders. Without a direct appeal, a spirit would often have no reason to come to us unless it was our own familiar spirit. Both of these types of evocations have their advantages, however, and there would only be problems if one of them were excluded. Spontaneous communications present no problems when we are in control of the spirits and are certain that we do not allow evil ones to dominate. So, it is almost always appropriate to wait the willingness of the spirits who want to manifest, because in this way their thought does not experience any restraint and we can receive admirable communications, whereas a spirit who is evoked may not be disposed to communicate at all or might be incapable of communicating in a way that we want it to. And moreover, the scrupulous examination that we have advised is a guarantee against bad communications. During regular spiritist meetings, especially when a sequential work is involved, there are always spirits who come without having to call them, and for the simple reason that they are accustomed to the regulatory of the sessions. Regularity of the sessions. Listen to me. Okay. They nearly always appear spontaneously to address some subject, develop a theme, or provide guidance. In such cases, it is easy to recognize them whether by their language, because it is always the same, or by their writing, or by certain particular habits. When we want to communicate with one particular spirit, it is absolutely necessary to evoke. If it can answer, we usually receive the response, "Yes, I am here," or "What would you like from me?" Sometimes it enters directly upon the subject, responding to the questions that we intend to ask before we have had a chance to do so. When a spirit is evoked for the first time, it is proper to address it as precisely as possible. Questions formulated in a curt, imperative way should be avoided because they could be a motive for it to stay away. Questions should be affable and respectful, proper to the particular spirit, and in all cases show the benevolence of the evoker. So basically, don't be a dick. Like, don't be a dick to the spirits. If you're going to evoke them, be respectful, be kind, ask your questions precisely and with relation to that spirit, right? Like, don't ask an artist a question about quantum physics. Like, that's not, they have no understanding. Like, they're not going to be able to answer that. You know what I mean? We are often surprised at how quickly an evoked spirit appears, even for the first time. One might say that it had been forewarned. That is, in fact, what happens when we are preoccupied beforehand with evoking it. This preoccupation is a sort of anticipated evocation, and since our familiar spirits are always nearby and attuned to our thought, they prepare for its coming, so that if there are no obstacles, the spirit is already present upon being evoked. Otherwise, the familiar spirit of the medium or the questioner, or one of those who is normally present, will go look for it, which does not require much time at all. If the evoked spirit cannot come immediately, a messenger. The pagans used to call it Mercury, or what we now scholars call the psychopomps, right? The messenger spirits that go between realms, okay? A messenger will set a time, 5 minutes, a quarter hour, an hour, or even several days hence. When the spirit finally arrives, it will say, "I'm here." Then we can begin to ask our questions. The messenger is not always a necessary intermediary because the evoker's appeal can be heard directly by spirit, as will be explained in later chapters concerning the method of transmitting thought. When we recommend that the evocation be made in the name of God, we meant for this recommendation to be taken seriously and not lightly. Anyone who thinks it is a meaningless formula would be better off to refrain from making the evocation altogether. Evocations often present more difficulties to mediums than spontaneous dictations, especially when trying to obtain precise responses to circumstantial questions. To do so, special mediums are necessary who are both flexible and positive, and we have already seen that they are very rare because, as we have also stated, fluidic connections cannot always be instantaneously established with the first spirit who puts its appearance. Did you get that? Fluidic connections cannot always be instantaneously established with the spirit who puts in its appearance. Thus, mediums should not become involved in evocations for detailed questions without being sure about the development of their faculties and the nature of the spirits who answer. Since if the mediums are not surrounded by good spirits, the evocations cannot be of an authentic character. Right? So this is another reason why mediums will have sessions together. They'll have spirit circles together. They'll have misas together. This is an opportunity for mediums to practice their faculties, strengthen up their faculties, and also sort of allow the energy among the advanced mediums to sort of spill out to everyone. Because what happens is when you're in the presence of other advanced mediums, your mediumistic abilities also get better. It's also really important to, before even going to a misa, before even going into a session, to really get that foundational work done. Do your research, read the codexes, take some classes on the fundamentals of spirit work, so that when you go to your first misa, you are prepared, you understand, you know what to expect, and even the pieces that may be unexpected, you can handle it and you're able to stay calm in situations, which is really, really important in sessions, right? So I'm going to throw in a little plug here. Your girl teaches foundational classes for people who want to get into Spiritism, people who want to get into Espiritismo. These foundational classes teach you things like the anatomy of spirit, the hierarchy of spirit, how your faculties work biologically within the body, how your fluids work, your spiritual hygiene, all the stuff that you need to know, how to prepare for a session, etc., so that when you find an elder, when you find someone whom you connect with and who is willing to then bring you into their circles, you are now very well prepared to participate and take on any additional information that they may have for you. All right. So if you're interested in those classes, just go to my website. Let's keep moving on. Mediums are normally more sought out for evocations involving private interests than for evocations of a general interest. This may be explained by the very natural desire to converse with loved ones. We think that it would be wise to make several important recommendations to mediums about this matter. First, they should not overwillingly accede to this desire when it involves individuals whose sincerity is not certain, and they should be on guard against traps that malevolent persons could set for them. Second, they should not, under any circumstances, rush into an evocation if they intuitively sense mere curiosity and self-interest rather than a serious intention on the part of the evoker, and they should refuse to propose any idle questions or one that is not within the ambit of those who may be rationally proposed to the spirits. Hi, Eric, you made it. I hope you got the video that I gave you. It was a response video, and I hope I cleared everything up for you. Yay, thanks for being here. Questions should be asked clearly and precisely without ulterior motives in order to obtain categorical responses. Any questions of an insidious character should be rejected because spirits do not appreciate questions that might put them to the test. Okay? To insist on questions of this nature is the same as to want to be deceived. The evoker should frankly and openly stick to the purpose, without subverge and meaningless detours. If the evoker is afraid to explain him or herself, it would be better to abstain. Okay, so if you ain't got something nice to say, if you ain't got nothing important to contribute to the conversation, just don't talk. Don't say nothing. All right, that's what they mean. It is also best to be very cautious when making evocations in the absence of those who request them. And most of the time, it is best not to make them at all. The reason is that only such persons are capable of controlling the responses, of judging the identity of the spirit, of eliciting clarifications aroused by the answers, and asking occasional questions to which the circumstances might lead. Furthermore, their presence is a link which attracts the spirit, whom is normally little disposed to communicate with strangers for whom it has no affinity. So, to sum up, mediums should avoid anything that might transform them into consultation instruments, which for most people is equivalent to fortune tellers. All right. So here's where the whole and Eric, I'll kind of throw what we were talking about in here earlier. So like this sentence can be perfectly misconstrued and taken to a fanatical standpoint, right? This sentence of mediums should avoid anything that might transform them into consultation instruments, for which most people it's equivalent to fortune tellers. So basically, if you're doing mediumship to help people connect with their family members and you're doing it almost for a job or for money, anyone who's like super fanatical about this book, you're going to get comments, you're going to get videos, you're going to get people saying that you're a fraud, you're going to get all kinds of shit from it because that one sentence was like taken way out of the thing, right? But we have to remember the time in which this was written. We have to remember the man who wrote it. We have to remember, the culture that was happening at that time. We're looking at a time period where Christianity itself and the scientists were at this like sort of toe to toe in terms of how can we meld these two together? How can we create almost like a Christian science? And spiritualism, not spiritism, spiritualism was born out of that. This idea of kind of creating a science out of Christian thought and using spirits for that purpose, right? So it's very riddled with a lot of dogmatic stuff. So you'll see things like, fortune tellers are bad, mounting spirits is bad, only low vibrational spirits will cause erratic behaviors in the body, aka BIPOC religions that mount spirits that cause them to do wild movements is considered low vibrational and evil spirits. All this stuff is put in these books because of the time frame that it was in. So again, as we go through these books, I really want you to take from it the protocols of how to work with spirit, the idea of purity, and not purity culture, don't get it twisted. This idea of purity, keeping your mind, keeping your faculties, keeping your spirit clean and pure so that you can do this work, right? Practice, study, all that stuff that he encourages in this book is very, very important, and we should not dismiss that. But like the elitist and like racist stuff that's in here, like he talks about disabled people and how like they're lame and stupid and we shouldn't like listen to them, and like it's really bad. So like we want to put that stuff aside, right? So just keep that in note, and I'll try my best to pinpoint those little pieces when I can, okay? Because a lot of times I just get so caught up in it. It's such a great read that I get so caught up in it. Anyway. So now we're on to the next subcategory, which is spirits who may be evoked, okay? We may evoke all spirits, no matter to which degree of the scale they belong, good ones and evil ones, those who recently departed life or those who lived in the most distant past, illustrious persons or the most obscure, our relatives, friends, and those who are not related to us. This, however, does not imply that they will always want to answer our appeal and that they even can. Regardless of their own desire or request, which may be refused by a higher power, they can be prevented by reasons that we cannot always understand. What we mean to say is that there is no impediment to communications per se, except what we will deal with next. Obstacles to manifestations are almost always of an individual nature and frequently result from the circumstances. So what he's talking about here is, and you've probably heard this throughout the community, right? You've heard this concept of we don't communicate with spirits until they've been deceased at least a year. Right? You'll hear that a lot in the community, right? Now, it's not written formally anywhere, but the reason why a lot of us stick to that rule is because we understand that usually after death, there's a period of transition, there's a period that happens, and because time works differently there, that period could take a very long time, or it can be instantaneous, before the next reincarnation. And so we like to allow enough time to procure before we start making contact with spirits. And especially if we're dealing with spirits who died in a traumatic way or in an unnatural way, because they may inadvertently still be earthbound. And the last thing we want to do is confuse them even more. The last thing we want to do is try and communicate with them and try and create an even stronger link for them to stay planted on this earth, when they should be crossing over, when they should be getting the schooling and the things that they need to progress. Okay, the goal is to elevate spirits, not keep them here, right? This is not the place of elevation, right? We want them to move forward. So that's one of the reasons, and that's why you'll hear that. Okay, now, among the causes that can interfere with a spirit's manifestation, some are proper to the spirit itself, while others are outside of it. Among the former, we should place the occupations or missions in which it is involved, and from which it cannot leave in order to answer to our own desires. In this case, its manifestation is merely postponed. Okay? So, again, a lot of times when we try to communicate with certain spirits, whether it's before the year or after the year, there may be intercessions. Other spirit guides might come in and say, no, 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 they're not ready yet, or they just don't show up at all, or whatever. The thing is not to get discouraged, because again, it's all about divine timing, right? Like, those spirits may not be at the right place to be able to communicate with you. Plus, we've already established, right? We've already established from the spirits book that it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy of both the medium and the spirit to be able to have these communications come through. And again, if these spirits are not adequately, if they don't have the adequate amount of energy to do that, they won't be able to make those manifestations or to make those communications anyway, even if they wanted to, even if they were present. Okay? Moreover, it is also its own situation to consider. Although incarnation per se is not an absolute obstacle, it can comprise it can comprise an impediment on certain occasions, particularly if it has occurred on a less evolved world, or if the spirit itself is a little dematerialized. On higher worlds, where the ties that bind the spirit to matter are very fragile, manifestation for the spirit is almost always easy as during the errant state, and in every case easier than on worlds where corporal matter is more compact. Okay, so again, we talk about this in the spirits book when they talk about the different worlds that are out there, potentially the different dimensions, the different worlds, you want to say. Some worlds are much more dense with matter, while other worlds have less density of matter. And so we're talking about higher vibrational, lower vibrational, right? And when you are of a higher vibration, you can easily materialize below. Like, you can come down to all these other material manifestations in a very easy way, whereas the opposite does not happen. If you are of a lower vibrational spirit, you cannot dematerialize as easily, you cannot raise that vibration as easily. You know what I'm saying? Because again, it's about evolution. Like, they're not there yet. You know what I mean? Hopefully I didn't confuse you on that one. Sorry. Outside causes have mostly to do with the nature of the medium, that of the evoker, the environment where the evocation occurs, and finally, the purpose of the evocation. Some mediums very easily receive communications from their familiar spirit, who may be more evolved or less so, whereas others are capable of serving as intermediaries for all spirits. It all depends on the sympathy or antipathy the attraction or repulsion that the medium's spirit exerts over the one being evoked, who may willingly or very unwillingly use it as an interpreter. Without taking the personal qualities of mediums into account, it also depends on the development of their mediumship. Spirits come more willingly and are especially more precise with mediums who do not offer any material obstacles. Whenever there is quality of moral conditions, then their more capable mediums are to write or otherwise express themselves, the broader their relationships with the spirit world. So hopefully you guys understood that piece, right? So again, the more adept you are as a medium, the more skilled you are with your faculties, the broader your scope of working with more spirits of every level. Whereas if you are still learning your gift, if you are still morally not on a higher ground, your likelihood of working with high spirits is nil to none, because again, you attract what you vibrate. You bring to you what comes to you. So people who are constantly surrounded by demons, constantly surrounded by energies that cause them a lot of strife, it is because of what they're putting out, what they're calling to them. So it's really important to address that inner work. And this is another reason why a lot of mediums and a lot of elders in the community will tell new adepts to seek therapy. Right? It's, you have to do that therapeutic stuff. You have to do that shadow work. You have to go through, you have to work it all out. Sometimes you'll be invited to a session where, the mediums will look for any particular causes that you might have within you so that they can help you remove them so that you can be fresh and clean for the next steps moving forward. There's a lot that goes into it. I think it's one of those things where people just assume you just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to be a medium, or hey, I want to, do spiritism work. And it just unfortunately doesn't work like that. We must further consider the ease that arises from habitually communicating with a particular spirit. Over time, the communicating spirit identifies with both the medium's spirit and the evoker's spirit. Regardless of the issue of sympathy, they establish fluidic ties that make communicating a lot easier. This is why the first manifestation is not always a satisfactory one, as we may desire, and also why the spirits themselves always ask to be evoked again. A spirit who customarily manifests feels at home. It has become familiar with the audience and the interpreters, and it speaks and acts more freely. But in the same way that you can build fluidic ties with good spirits, you can also build fluidic ties with the harmful ones, which we call causas. We call them, they're problematic. They build problems within the body. And those fluidic ties need to be cut and cleansed. In sum, what we have just explained means that the ability to evoke any and every spirit does not imply that a particular spirit is obligated to be at our disposal. It may answer us on one occasion and not on another. It may work with a particular medium or evoker who pleases it, but not with another. It can say what it wants without being coerced to say what it does not want to say. It can withdraw at any time. And finally, for reasons depending on its own will or another, after having been cooperative for some time, it can suddenly cease to appear anymore. For these reasons, whenever we want to evoke a new spirit, we must ask our protector guides if the evocation is possible. If it is not, the guide usually states its reasons for the hindrance, and then it would be futile to insist. Here, an important question arises as to whether or not it is proper to evoke evil spirits. This depends on the purpose and the ascendancy one has over them. It is not improper when evoking them for a serious purpose, for instructing and helping them improve themselves. On the other hand, it is very highly improper when done out of mere curiosity or for entertainment, or if we put ourselves at their disposal by asking them for some favor. Good spirits, in this case, may very well give evil spirits the power to do what has been asked of them, but reserve the right of later severely punishing the audacious persons who dared invoke their aid, considering them more powerful than God. It would be in vain to intend to promise to use the aid for a good purpose and to dismiss the spirit servant once and for all after the service has been rendered. Such service, no matter how small, represents a true pact with evil spirits, and they do not easily relinquish their prey. Okay? Only through moral superiority may one exert ascendancy over less evolved spirits. Perverse spirits recognize the superiority of morally upright men and women, and when facing people who try to oppose their fierce energy using only their own willpower, they react against such persons with a kind of brute force and often prove to be stronger. A certain individual who thus sought to dominate a rebellious spirit through willpower received this response: "Leave me alone, you braggart heirs. You are no better than me. What would you say about one thief preaching morality to another?" It may seem very surprising that when the name of God is invoked against such spirits, it hardly ever has any effect. St. Louis explains the reason for this in the following response: "The name of God only has influence over imperfect spirits when the one who invokes it can do so with the authority of his or her own virtues. Coming from the mouth of someone who is morally no better than the spirit itself, it is just an ordinary word like any other. The same applies to sacred objects used to oppose them, the most terrible weapon inoffensive in hands that are unable or incapable of using it." And this right here, this little section right here, is one of the sections that I love using when people tell me that, doing online sessions are dangerous. Because if something were to go wrong, like if a bad spirit were to somehow enter the space or have an issue with a person, being online, you are unable to rectify that situation. And I could not agree. I could not disagree more, because you don't need to lay hands on someone to relieve them of their issues. You do not need to be in person with someone to relieve them of your issues. Again, we are talking about energy. We are talking about spirit. Spirit does not need physical contact. You don't need it. It's a nice thing to have, but it can be a clutch. And if you are truly a believer in the higher spirits, in your protector spirits, in God, in your own talents, in your own moral standing, then you could dispel those spirits with your words alone, because you hold true to who you are and your spirit matches that. So, it's just one of those things that I find funny. It's kind of a mute argument, in my opinion. So now we're on the next little subsection. Hi, Joanne. I'm reading from, it's called The Medium's Book by Allan Kardec. Yes. So now we're on the next subsection, and it's called The Proper Manner of Speaking to Spirits. Okay? The degree to which spirits have evolved naturally indicates the tone in which we should speak to them. It is obvious that the more elevated they are, the more they deserve our respect, consideration, submission. We should treat them with no less deference than if they were still incarnate. But for other reasons, during terrestrial life, we would consider their job and their social position, whereas in the spirit world, we only respect them for their moral superiority. This elevation in itself places them above the puerilities of our formal flatterings. We will not win their benevolence with mere words, but with sincere sentiments. Therefore, it would be ridiculous to give them the titles we use to distinguish positions and which in life would please their vanity. If they are truly superior, they do not only assign little importance to these titles, but they also find them disagreeable. A moral thought pleases them more than flattering epithets. Otherwise, they would not be above ordinary humanity. The spirit of venerable priest, who was a prince of the church, so to say, while on earth, and who practiced the teachings of Jesus, responded to someone who evoked him by the title of my Lord. You should at least say my ex-Lord, for here there is only one Lord, who is God. You should know very well that there are those here who kneeled before me while on earth, but whom I kneel before now. Okay? Yeah, no problem, Joanne. And if you want to catch up with previous chapters, I already read the Spirits book. That's the first book in the series. That's on my YouTube channel. And now we're on the second book. And we're almost done with this one as well. So you can catch up on all the previous episodes on my YouTube, okay? When addressing low order spirits, their particular character determines the language we should employ. Among them are those who may be inoffensive and even benevolent, but who are nevertheless frivolous, ignorant, or foolish. And to address them like serious spirits, as some people do, would be the same as if we were to bow before a grade school student or a donkey wearing a doctoral hood. A casual tone is certainly not strange to them, nor does it offend them. On the contrary, that is what they prefer. Among the less evolved spirits are those who are unhappy. Whatever the wrongs they are expiating, their sufferings deserve our pity all the more, for no one escapes these words of Christ. Let the one who is without sin cast the first stone. Treating them with benevolence is consoling to them. In their need of sympathy, they ought to find in us the same tolerance that we would want for ourselves. Spirits who show how little evolved they are, though their cynical language, lies, base sentiments, and perfidious advice are certainly less worthy of our interest than those whose words display their repentance, we should still nonetheless treat them with at least as much pity as the great criminals inspire in us. The way to reduce them to silence is by showing that we are of higher order than they, because they only establish relationships with persons of whom they have nothing to fear. Perverse spirits recognize the superiority of moral individuals just as they recognize the superiority of high order spirits. So, to summarize, it would be irreverent to treat high order spirits as our equals, just as it would be ridiculous to show the same deference to all spirits without exception. We should venerate those who deserve it, recognize those who protect and assist us, and show the others the same benevolence that we ourselves might need someday. By unveiling the incorporeal world, we learn to understand it, and this understanding should guide our relationship with its inhabitants. In their ignorance, the ancients raised altars to them. For us, they are creatures who may be more purified or less so than ourselves are, and it is to God alone that we raise altars to. So again, here's another part of the book where if you see fanatical readers read that section, he talks a lot about the ancients as if they're these savage brutes who didn't know any better, who worshipped low-level spirits, who got mounted by demons, and who he's talking about. Okay, he's talking about BIPOC people. He's talking about people of Mexico, people of Africa, people of South America. That's who he's talking about. He's talking about these ancient savages. And so again, these passages can come across very elitist, very racist, if they are read with non-critical thoughts. You have to be very critical about what you're reading here, who wrote it, when it was written, and all that, to understand that some of it needs to be put to the side, right? Next subcategory, the usefulness of private evocations, okay? Communications with highly evolved spirits or those who animated great personages in antiquity are valuable for their elevated teachings. These spirits have reached a degree of purification that enables them to embrace a wider circle of ideas and to unveil mysteries that surpass human possibilities, and to thereby initiate us better than other spirits could into certain matters. However, this does not mean that communications with lower order spirits are worthless, because the observer can definitely learn from them. To understand the customs of a nation, one must study it on every level. However, whoever observes it in only one of its aspects does not understand it well at all. The history of a nation is not the history of its monarchs or its authorities. Rather, to form an opinion about it, we must research the life of its people and their particular customs. Thus, high order spirits are the authorities of the spirit world, and their very elevation places them above us in such a way that we are amazed at the distance that separates them from us. The more burgose spirits, may they forgive us for using this expression, make the conditions of their new existence more palpable to us. Their connection between the corporal and the spirit life is narrower, and we can comprehend it better because it touches us more closely. So, by learning directly from them about what they have become, what they think about, and what individuals of all conditions and characters experience, moral and cruel, great and small, happy and unhappy individuals of our own times, in a word, those who have lived among us, whom we have seen and known, whose real lives we have witnessed with its virtues and errors, we better understand their joys and their sufferings, and we share in both and receive a moral lesson from both. This lesson is more profitable the more intimate our connections between the spirits and us. And since it is easier for us to put ourselves in the place of one who is our equal than of that whom we only see through the mirage of celestial glory. Ordinary spirits show us the practical results of the great and sublime truths, which the high order spirits give us in theory. And moreover, nothing is worthless in the study of science. Newton discovered the laws of universal forces by observing the simplest phenomenon. Evoking ordinary spirits has a further advantage in that it puts us in contact with suffering spirits, those whom we may comfort and help with good counsels in their advancement. Thus, we can be useful while we learn. To seek only our own satisfaction in our relationship with spirits would be plain selfish, and those who fail to extend a helping hand to the unfortunate only prove their own pride. What good would it do to obtain fine communications from elevated spirit if doing so does not render us better and more charitable and more benevolent towards our brothers and sisters of this or that world? What would become of our impoverished, diseased persons if doctors refused to touch their open sores? I really, really love that passage because, again, another thing that you'll see in the community is this sort of, not fear, I don't want to say fear, but fear mongering. You'll see a lot of fear mongering about lower level spirits and about evil spirits, right? And you'll see this whole dialogue around, oh my God, if you get, a causa by an evil spirit, it needs to be removed. You need to cleanse. You need to seek the help of an espiritista. You need blah, blah, blah. But no one ever says, there's a spirit that's in you for the reason that you guys vibe on the same level. So you attracted this spirit. This spirit was attracted to you because there's some common ground between the two of you. And that common ground is where the illness is and where the illness needs to be resolved. And in doing so, you are clean of that spirit, but we're not done yet. We now have to elevate that spirit because we need to have pity for that spirit. That spirit was also going through a cause, was also going through issues that need to be resolved. And people are so quick to just remove the spirit and then just kind of send it away. For what? So that it can then go into the next person? No, you're learning how to do this stuff. You are working with your protector guides. You are increasing your moral integrity. You are practicing your faculties. You're doing all of this hard work so that you can help those of lesser spiritual degree in this world and in other worlds. That is the job of the spiritist. That is the job of the espiritista. And it's very difficult to see so many people fear mongering and so many people using these lower level entities to cash in, if you will, cash in on removing them for you. Yeah, they're going to remove them and send them away so that the next person can get it, and then they can be there to cash in on that person and remove it from them as well. And the cycle goes on and on. It's a problem, and we see it a lot in our community, and we really should nip it in the butt, right? So now we're on the next subcategory of this chapter. And this is the part of the chapter where Allan Kardec is asking the spirit, almost like an interview, right? Asking the spirit questions, and then the spirit answers the questions, all right? So here we go. Could someone evoke spirits without being a medium? Everyone can evoke spirits. Even though they may not be able to manifest materially, they may nevertheless approach and listen to the evoker. Will a spirit who is evoked always answer when called? It depends on the situation because there are circumstances in which it is unable to answer. What causes may prevent a spirit from coming or from answering? Well, first, its own will. Next, its corporal state, if it is incarnate, its mission, or perhaps prohibition to appear. There are also spirits who can never communicate, who, because of their nature, still inhabit worlds less evolved than Earth. Furthermore, those on globes of punishment cannot communicate unless they have received permission from higher up, which is only granted in cases of general usefulness. In order for a spirit to communicate, it must have reached the degree of evolution of the world to which it is called, because otherwise it will be foreign to the culture of such world and will not have the means of comparison available for expressing itself. This does not apply to those who have been sent on a mission or an excipiation to less evolved worlds, because they possess the ideas needed for responding. We've already talked about that in the Spirits book. For what reasons might a spirit be denied permission to communicate? It may be a trial or a punishment for it or for the one who calls it. Can spirits who are scattered throughout space or on different worlds hear the evocations that are directed to them from all points of the universe? They are frequently informed by the familiar spirits who surround you and who go look for them. However, in such a case, there is a phenomenon that is difficult to explain to you, for you cannot yet comprehend the way thought is transmitted between spirits. Nevertheless, what I can say is that the evoked spirit, no matter how far away, receives an impulse of thought, so to speak, like a kind of electric shock, which calls its attention to the direction from which the thought has been addressed to it. We may say that it understands thought in the same way you understand a voice. Is the universal fluid the vehicle for thought in the same way that air is the vehicle for sound? Yes. With the difference that sound can only be heard over a very short distance, whereas thought can reach the infinite. A spirit in space is like a traveler who, in the middle of a vast plain, suddenly hears his name and turns in the direction from where he has been called. We know that distances mean nothing to the spirits, but we marvel at seeing them sometimes respond so quickly to the call, almost as if they were already close by. Sometimes they really are. If the evocation was premeditated, the spirit has been forewarned and frequently is present before being called. Because again, thought travels fast. So just the mere thought of you saying to yourself, you know what? Tonight I'm going to do a ritual and I'm going to pray to my grandfather who's deceased and I'm going to call him in. Just the sheer thought of you doing that before even doing the ritual has already sent out the alerts, has already sent out the signal to the spirits. So by the time you get to the ritual to do the thing, that spirit may show up very quickly, very, very quickly. Does the ease with which the evoker is heard depend on the circumstances? Undoubtedly. A spirit who is called with a thought of sympathy and benevolence is more moved by it. It is as if it recognizes the voice of a friend. If not called in this manner, often the evocation cannot proceed. The thought emitted through evocation touches the spirit, but if badly directed, it becomes lost in a vacuum. This also happens among individuals. If the one addressed is not interested or is even antipathetic, he or she might hear, but most of the time will not answer. Have you ever been in a crowded room and you see someone you recognize, but you can't quite remember their name, right? So you go, hey, and you say it in a way that like hopefully gets their attention, but they don't turn around. It's like that. It's like that. You can send out the message, but the spirits won't hear it or will not respond to it. But if you go, hey, Brenda, you've got their attention now. Now Brenda turns around because she heard her name. It was directed to her, right? Does an evoked spirit manifest voluntarily or is it a constraint to do so? It obeys the will of God. That is, the general laws governing the universe. Nonetheless, constrained is not the right word since it deems whether or not it is convenient to answer, and in doing so, it exerts its own free will. A high order spirit will always answer if called for a useful purpose. It will only refuse to respond at meetings of non-serious persons or those who try to evoke it as a means of entertainment. Can an evoked spirit refuse to answer? Of course. If not, how could it have free will? Do you think that all spirits in the universe are at your beck and call? Do you yourselves feel obligated to respond to everybody who calls out your name? However, when I say that it may refuse, I am referring to the evoker's request because a low order spirit can be constrained by a higher order one to manifest. Does the evoker have any means to force the spirit to answer in spite of itself? not if the spirit is morally equal or superior. I say morally and not intellectually, because in that case, you would have no authority over it at all. If it is morally inferior, however, you can make it appear for its own good, for then other spirits will help you. Would it be improper to evoke low order spirits? And could there be any danger that might dominate the evoker? The only dominant the bleh, they only dominate those who allow them to. Evokers who are assisted by good spirits and have nothing to be afraid of, since they dominate low order spirits and not the other way around. Whenever mediums are alone, they should avoid this type of evocation, especially if they are beginners. Is there any kind of special inner state necessary for evocations? The best state is one of contemplation when one wants to communicate with serious spirits. With faith and a desire for goodness, one is more able to evoke high order spirits. By lifting the soul in a few moments of contemplation at the time of evocation, one identifies with good spirits and makes them more amenable to coming. Is faith necessary for evocations? Faith in God? Yes. For everything else, faith will develop with the desire for goodness and the intention of being taught. When men and women are united in thought and intent, are they more able to evoke spirits? Whenever all are united through clarity, charity, and for the good purposes, they achieve great things. Nothing is more harmful to evocations than differences of thought. This is really important too. So those of you guys who are interested in joining sessions and misas and gatherings of mediums and spiritists, you must have cohesive thought among you. You must have good intentions among you. You must not approach that space with negativity. You got to leave all that shit at the door, because those things will attract the things that you don't want to attract in those spaces. Okay? Is it a useful precaution to join hands for a few minutes at the start of meetings in order to form a current? A current is a physical method that produces no unity among you if there is no corresponding unity of thought. It is more effective to be united in a common thought, with each participant appealing to the good spirits. You have no idea of what you could obtain during a serious meeting in which there is no trace of pride or self-importance, but only a perfect sentiment of mutual cordiality. So again, you don't need to be in physical presence. You don't need to be physically touching each other. You just need to be in cohesive thought to have a great experience. Is it preferable to make evocations at certain days and certain hours? Yes, if possible in the same place as well. Then spirits more willingly appear. Your constant wish is what helps spirits to come and communicate with you. They have their own concerns which they cannot suddenly leave unexpectedly for your personal satisfaction. When I say in the same place, I am not implying an absolute condition, because spirits can go anywhere. What I mean is that it is preferable to have a place dedicated to meetings because it leads to better contemplation. Do certain objects like medallions and talismans have any property for attracting or repelling spirits, as some people claim they do? That is a pointless question, since you know that matter exerts no influence over spirits. You can be sure that no good spirit ever offered such absurd advice. The virtue of talismans of any nature only exists in the mind of superstitious individuals. So, what do you think about spirits who set appointments in gloomy places at inconvenient times? They are spirits who have fun with those who listen to them. It is always useless and frequently dangerous to give in to any suggestions, useless because absolutely nothing can be gained beyond being deceived. Dangerous, not because of what the evil spirits might do, but because of the influence they might exert over weak minds. Are certain days and certain hours more propitious for evocations? It doesn't matter at all to spirits. Like everything else, material. And it would be superstitious to believe in the influence of certain days and hours. Hold on a second. Okay. Sorry, I thought I smelled fire. Nope, it's a barbecue outside. Okay. My apologies. It would be superstitious to believe in the influence of certain days and certain hours. The most propitious times are when evokers are less involved in habitual occupations and when their body and spirit are calmer. Is being evoked pleasant or unpleasant for spirits? Like, do they willingly answer when we call them? That depends on their character and the reason why you call them. Whenever the objective is praiseworthy and the means are sympathetic, evocation is very pleasant and even attractive. Spirits always feel happy with displays of affection. Some consider it a great fortune to be able to communicate with humans, and they suffer when they are forgotten by them. However, this also depends on their character, as I have already stated. Among spirits, there are misanthropes who do not like to be inconvenienced and whose responses mirror their bad mood, especially when called by individuals whom they do not care about. A particular spirit often has no reason at all to answer the appeal of someone it does not know or toward whom it is indifferent, and who is usually motivated by curiosity. In such a case, if it answers at all, it is usually a quick appearance, provided there is actually a serious and instructive objective in the evocation. Is there any difference between good and evil spirits with respect to the willingness with which they answer our call? There is a big difference. Evil spirits only answer willingly when they hope to dominate and deceive. They are very unwilling when they are forced to manifest in order to confess their wrongs, and they try to get away like school child who is called up to be reprimanded. Nonetheless, they can be forced to manifest by higher order spirits as a punishment and as a lesson for incarnates. Evocation is unpleasant for good spirits when it is for no purpose or for trivialities. They either do not answer at all or soon withdraw. Whoever they may be, spirits generally do not like to serve as a distraction for the curious any more than you do. You often have no other purpose for evoking a spirit than to see what it might have to say to you, or to question it about some particularity of its life, which it has no interest in revealing to you because it has no reason to confide in you. Do you think that it likes to be cross examined at your pleasure? Don't fool yourselves. What it wouldn't do while alive, it will more likely decline to do as a spirit. Do spirits have to be evoked to manifest? Nope. Most often, they manifest without having been called, which shows that they do so of their own accord. So, when a spirit manifests without being evoked, can we be certain of its identity? Not at all. For deceptive spirits often employ this means in order to better deceive you. When we evoke a spirit by our thought, will it answer even if it doesn't express itself through writing or some other means? Writing is a physical means by which spirit shows its presence, but it's the thought that attracts it and not the act of writing. So, for example, those of you who are mediums who also use tarot or pendulum or bones or dice or playing cards, whatever you use to evoke spirit and call spirit down, understand that it is not the tool that is doing the thing. It is you that's calling the spirit down, and the tool is the method of the communication that both you and the spirit understand. It's a language that both you and the spirit understand and can therefore communicate with each other through. Okay? When a less evolved spirit manifests, can we make it withdraw? Yes, by not listening to it at all. However, how can you expect it to withdraw if you are amused by its turpitude? Like the fools among you, low order spirits attach themselves to those who listen to them complacently. Is evocation in the name of God any guarantee against the interference of evil spirits? God's name does not put all perverse spirits in check, but it restrains many of them. It is a means for you to keep many away, and it is even more effective if pronounced from the bottom of the heart and not as a banal formula. Can we evoke several spirits at the same time by name? This presents no difficulty if there are 3 or 4 hands to write with. 3 or 4 spirits will respond at the same time. This happens when we have several mediums available. And this does also happen when we have misas, right? So the more mediums you have, the likelihood that more spirits may show up, right? So when several spirits are evoked at once with only one medium present, which one responds? One of them will respond for all and will express the collective thought. Can the same spirit communicate at the same time in the same session through 2 different mediums? As easily as among you. Certain individuals can dictate several letters at once, yes. We have seen a spirit respond to questions at the same time through 2 mediums, one writing in French and the other in English, both being identical in meaning and sometimes even literal translations of each other. Can a spirit who is evoked at the same time in several places respond spontaneously to the questions? Yes, if it is a high order spirit, yes. Okay, well, in such a case, does the spirit divide itself up or does it possess the gift of ubiquity? Like, how does this work? The sun is only one whole, but nevertheless, it irradiates its light everywhere, projecting its rays far and wide, but without dividing itself. And the same applies to spirits. A spirit's thought is like a spark which projects its light afar, which can be seen from every part of the horizon. The purer the spirit is, the more its thought radiates and scatters like a light. Less evolved spirits are too dense and cannot respond to more than one person at a time. They cannot answer your evocation at all if they have already been called to another place. And this is yet another reason. This is yet another reason why I love watching TikTokers who all believe in the same like demons and stuff, and who all are like calling on the same like lower vibrational spirits at the same time, and they all manage to all get answers. It's like, oh really? Okay. Can pure spirits who have already completed their series of incarnations be evoked? Yes. but very rarely, because they only communicate with pure and sincere hearts, none who are proud or selfish. Hence, you must distrust low order spirits who claim to be such spirits in order to seem more important to you. Okay, well, how is it possible for the spirits of the most eminent individuals so easily and familiarly to answer the call of the most obscure persons? Humans judge spirits according to their own standards, which is wrong. Earthly status disappears after corporeal death. The sole standard among spirits is goodness, and those who are good can go anywhere there is good, and anywhere good deeds are to be performed. How soon after death can a spirit be evoked? You could evoke a spirit at the very moment of death, but since it may still be in a state of confusion, it will not be able to respond very well. Is the evocation at the moment of death more troublesome for the spirit than it would be later on? Sometimes. It would be like someone making you get up in the middle of sleep before you are completely awake. Nevertheless, there are some who have no problem at all, and evocation may even help them out of that state of confusion. So, how can the spirit of a child who died at a tender age respond consciously if during its corporal life it hadn't yet arrived at any self awareness? A child's soul is a spirit still wrapped in the swaddling clothes of matter. When it is free of matter, however, it enjoys its spirit faculties, for the spirits have no age, which proves that the spirit of the child has already lived before. Nonetheless, until it has been completely freed from its body, its conversation may still display some childlike characteristics. Okay, so I've already went past my time, and we are nowhere near done this chapter. So I'm gonna pause here for now. So I am pausing at the evocation of animals. The evocation of animals. That's the spot where I'm stopping, and we're gonna pick up there next time. So that was a lot. That was a lot, you guys. So, do we have any questions? How are we feeling about that chapter? Is there anything you need me to clarify? Was there anything that you agreed with or you found confusing? Let's talk about it. Oh, that's so sweet. Okay. Oh, peace and joy to all of you. Of course, you welcome. You welcome. See, this is something being a neurodivergent myself. And I mean like a legit one. Like I have like legit issues, right? It was always very difficult for me to focus, to concentrate, to remain consistent with certain practices. And I had to teach myself techniques to do that. And those techniques eventually allowed me to do my work easier. And unfortunately, a lot of people haven't figured out those techniques yet. So I really like reading these books out loud for people like myself who are having issues reading the book themselves, staying focused on the book, maybe have dyslexia, maybe are suffering from, the ability to read and comprehend at the same time and all that stuff. So I want to read out loud so they can get that auditory stuff going. And then I want to clarify wherever clarification needs so they can get that comprehension going. And hopefully, that helps. Oh, we have a question here from Yanika. So, is it all right to invoke my good spirits in front of the Mesa Blanca of one spiritual court if I do not know their name? Of course it is. Of course it is. And this is the opportunity, and this is an opportunity for you to learn their name. So, the more you approach your good spirits, your protector spirits, the more you call them with an open heart, with true moral standing, with the true intent to want to build relationship with them, to want to work through them and with them, the more they will appear and show themselves and give you messages through your dreams and through your divinations, and they will give you their names. Now, we spoke about this in a previous chapter, I think in this book actually, where the spirits said straight up, they said, names don't really mean anything to us. You know what I mean? Like, once they shed their physical body, they shed all of the identity that went with that physical body. So a spirit guide who's of a higher evolved or higher elevated spirit, or even a spirit guide that was never incarnated, may not even have a name. So when you work with that nameless spirit for a while and you really start to build that relationship with each other, that spirit will either give you a name that they don't mind being called, or they will have you name them so that, based on the feeling that they give you and based on the relationship that you guys have built together. And it becomes a really nice thing. You can even turn it into a whole like naming ceremony thing too. So thank you for your perspective on the prejudices of Kardec's time. Your reading is so helpful to avoid being triggered while reading it myself, if that makes sense. I appreciate. Yes. Oh my God. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Yes. These books can be very triggering. It sure can. The Spirits book. Ooh, that first book. Ooh, it's cringy. It's cringy as a motherfucker. It really is. You'd be like, what did he just say? Oh my God. But when you really approach it with a critical thought, when you really kind of read past it and you say, okay, I don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater, right? Like, there's some good shit in here. And obviously this is the tenets, this is the codex of like all of espiritismo, like, that's being out there. So like, obviously there's something to it, but like, whoa, so it's just important to kind of, work past that. And it's tough. It is tough. It's triggering for sure. I had a crazy experience while listening to an audiobook of Allan Kardec. I really like his stuff, but I do prefer audio, and that's why I appreciate a real person reading. Awesome. I'm glad you like it. What's your take on how someone can be so spiritually advanced and educated and still hold the closed-minded norms as other less woke folk? It's beautiful that you asked that question, because in the Spirits book, they actually talk about that. They talk about, and now I'm going to speak of it from a spirit point of view, because although we're incarnate, we're still spirits, okay? Like, we still have a spirit within us. So I'm going to speak to it as a spirit. The spirits can be very intellectual. The spirits can have degrees in when they were once alive, of course, can have degrees in medicine and science and this and that. They could have been the most brilliant people ever. But their morality, their ability to separate themselves from the tribes, if you will, of the norm, of the populace, of what's being done out there, has not yet developed. And that's okay. You can still learn things from those people, but you always have to keep in the back of your mind that there's still a piece of them that they themselves still need to work on. And we all need to work on that. Like, for me, I feel like I'm morally, like, in between. I feel like I'm kind of middle ground with all of it. Intellect, moral, and all of that. And your girl still gets caught up in the juice. I still get caught up in the tea. I still get caught up in the nonsense every once in a while. And I trip and I fall and I come out of character. It happens, right? But then we gotta stop. We gotta pick ourselves back up. We have to remember why we're on this road, this purpose, what our roles are as espiritistas, what our role is as a spiritist, and why we're doing the things that we're doing. When we walk in faith, hope, and charity, when we walk with this intention of, just being a good person and taking care of your neighbor, things start to shed. Your need to want to be involved in the gossip goes away. Your desire to want to engage in certain lower vibrational things starts to go away. Even your need to want to drink, smoke, do drug, all that stuff starts to shed, because it literally you can just feel the ickiness from all of it. It literally changes your spirit composition, and you end up not liking it. You feel unsettled. So my advice is, give them grace. Okay? Give them grace. Nobody's perfect. People can be real super smart. People can be on their moral high horse one day and be trash the next day. Give them grace. All right? They'll figure out their way. They'll figure out their way. In the meantime, you model what you want to see out of other people. Model it and stay true to that, and you'll be all right. Hello, Black Luciferian Witch. Thank you for calling me beautiful. I am not wearing any makeup today, so I appreciate that compliment very much. Thank you. Anything else, you guys? I went on a tangent on that one. Anything else? How are we feeling? Okay. So with that said, I will try my best to be here again next Thursday. I know some of you guys are on different timelines and it might be a little too late for you. I'm going to try and come on at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time because I'm in New York next Thursday, okay? Which is like right before 4th of July, I think. All right, so I want everyone to have a beautiful, beautiful night. Luz y progreso. And make sure you catch up and you like and you subscribe and you share and you comment and you tell people about this. This is how we grow. Have a good night, everybody.